It's just like John said. Um, you know, I applied for. I sent a resume in and was asked to be part of the administration in this job after having no experience of working at this level. I mean, I was like you. I mean, I was out there doing stuff at the worker level in various positions, and so it's a little uncomfortable, I have to tell you, when the big lights here and they've got this big TV screen in front of us. It's not my natural style, but it's also true what John said, that we do have a bunch of folks that we work with, that I work with, that come out of the same sort of background, and that I think it's the way we need to solve these problems. This is one of my, I know I sound like I'm sucking up, but this is one of my favorite groups to come to, because when I was looking through the little booklet on all the issues, again, I'm going to steal from John a little bit. I mean, you are tackling and talking about ways to do this better, and in this case, floodplain management. And I think it's that set of ideas, it's that conversation that is going to be the difference between whether we succeed or whether we don't. So I'm really pleased to be here to share just a couple of thoughts with you on that. I don't know if I work this right. Whenever you do one of these, and this is the first talk I've ever given where I had a PowerPoint and I debated, because what everybody just racks and stacks a bunch of different thoughts, and there are things that we've talked about before, you've heard about before. I finally decided it wouldn't be the worst thing to go ahead and list them up, just to sort of imprint in folks' minds sort of the context or some of the specifics of some of the stuff John was talking about. I think the key thing in all of this, if I had a message, is I don't believe, the Corps leadership doesn't believe that we are providing the best solutions to the problems that we face. And that we both, the leadership in the Corps and Joelle and Darcy, my boss, and me, are trying to create a new way, a new approach to solving these problems, a new way to incorporate a lot of the ideas that practitioners around the country are working on to try and solve these problems, particularly as it relates to the Corps of Engineers. When I first came, they don't give you a little card that says, here's your guidance. You kind of go around and you pick it up. And I quickly realized that what my bosses, what the Congress, what everyone was saying was, we want the Corps of Engineers to be smarter. We want the Corps to be greener. We want the Corps to be more transparent. We want the Corps to be more collaborative. We want the Corps to be more accountable. I mean, those were I don't know if anyone ever sat me down and said, here's your mission, but I heard enough people say some combination of those things. And so I think at some level, focusing on those sorts of ideas as we deal with these sets of issues is what we're about. John mentioned the changes to the principles and guidelines. We're working on the guidelines now, drafting up some guidelines. What we have are the principles and standards, the policy framework for a new approach, and John talked about that. I would say another characteristic of these issues is there's huge uncertainty. I mean, we don't know how the climate change is going to play out. We don't know how all the other kinds of macro changes are going to take place, and so we have to find a way. And I think the principles and guidelines give us a way. The guidelines will give us a way to figure out how to be smarter as we move forward in the light of all the uncertainty that's there, and not step back from it, but to press forward even in the face of it. I think I've said many times before that when my predecessor, John Paul Woodley, first time I met with him before I came to the job, but after I'd been announced, I asked him what his biggest frustration was, and his answer was simple. He said, I cannot send the best projects forward. And what he was really saying is our current principles and guidelines force us into a very narrow box of alternatives that the Corps has to recommend that aren't the best alternatives, aren't smart alternatives. And so, as much as anything, I think the approach is to be smarter by employing these various things that I've just mentioned. Well, my job, I think, is to try and roll this up a little bit into a floodplain management perspective. There I go. The top one there, the aging infrastructure, is the big elephant. Whether it's our dams, our levees, our locks, our hydropower facilities, we've got aging infrastructure that's expensive to deal with. And right now, our budget, as we put our budget together, the highest priority goes to life safety issues, and that's pretty much taking up our entire flood risk management part of our budget, is that we have facilities that are starting to fail, and you change the operations to deal with the structural issues, and then you immediately go out to try and put a patch on, put a remedy to fix structurally those safety issues. That's not a very prospective way to deal with the problem. We have to, in the back of our minds always is, how do we move forward in the face of the significant issue with our aging infrastructure? As we do that, sort of the Corps' way of thinking about what the new principles and guidelines are asking us to do is through this concept of integrated water resources management. Steve Stockton, if you've heard him talk, I mean, he talks about this concept. We had a conference in Washington last August. This was the theme of this. The pieces of trying to step away from single-purpose projects to multi-purpose projects, thinking about it on a watershed basis, as John talked about, having more of a bottoms-up kind of an approach. Right now, when the Corps looks at a problem that they're asked to try and come up with a project solution for, they're forced to justify it as the project that optimizes the NED for that project. And so there's no way to think about the problem in the context of a watershed. The Corps is forced to justify the project as though it were the only game in town. And that doesn't make any sense. That leads you to solutions that aren't solutions. It's not the Corps' fault. That's the rules. I mean, that's the national, that's the regulation that has the force of law for the Corps. I mean, that is the way they do it. That's what OMB expects. That's what the Congress expects. I think that's changing, and that people are saying that we've got to come up with a better way to deal with this. I would say we're going to fail if we don't adopt a more integrated approach to work these issues, and certainly as we move into this century, I mean, the paradigm or the approach for this century has to include this broader integrated approach.